Hey everybody, this is Sarah Kennedy, and this video is going to be about one of my most favorite things to talk about, and that's emotions. And I want to talk about the three most intense emotions that we can feel as humans, which is grief, anger/rage, and fear. The first thing I want to say is that most of us are walking around on a day-to-day basis, stuffing down our emotions with things like food, Netflix, alcohol, you name it. We have lots of ways we stuff down our emotions, and we especially stuff down the most three intense emotions. What happens when we do that is that, number one, grief, when we stuff down grief, it turns into chronic depression or just chronic dullness and sadness in our bodies. When we stuff down anger, rage, what that turns into is chronically feeling resentful about everything or irritated. Like if you feel irritated a lot, you have some stuff down anger. When we stuff down fear, that leads to us feeling chronically anxious about things. Now, the beauty about these three intense emotions is that when we feel them, they can actually serve to open us up. So when we actually feel our grief, grief can really open up the heart space so we can feel more love. When we really feel our anger, it can open up the pelvis so we can feel more of that passionate, orgasmic energy. And when we really let ourselves feel the fear and let it move through us, it can open up a feeling of just generally feeling excited about life. So I have three different tools that I use to process through grief, anger, rage, and fear, one for each emotion that I want to share with you. So I'm going to start with grief. So first off, how to access grief, because we all are walking down with a lot of stuff down grief in our bodies because we rarely let ourselves really grieve. So one way to access it might be that something spontaneously happens in your life, like a breakup or a death, where you would have a doorway to access to feeling your grief. If that doesn't happen, what I do to access the grief in my body is if I notice I'm feeling depressed or sad, I'll sit down and I'll really feel into that depression. And it's like I'll follow it down a well. So I'll feel that sadness and I'll follow it down, 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 down until the sadness gets a little more intense and a little more intense. And then when I hit the bottom of the well, I hit the grief. And you'll know you'll hit grief because it'll feel fucking intense. Grief is a really intense emotion. So for me, when I hit the grief, it'll often almost just knock me over. Like I'll sometimes even just fall on my knees. That's how intense grief can feel. That's why we avoid it, because it feels really intense. But when we hit it, for me, what spontaneously happens when I actually hit the grief is that I start sobbing. And I don't mean crying. I literally mean sobbing, wailing, really intensely. Sometimes I'll even have snot running down my face. And it'll have this feeling of like, wow, I could sob for 2,000 years. I don't actually sob for 2,000 years. It's usually 10 or 15 minutes, but it'll feel like that. That's how deeply grief feels in our body. And so I'll sob and wail just for 10, 15 minutes, however long it takes for that amount of grief that's getting processed to naturally process itself through my system. And what happens through the sobbing is that your chest is expanding and contracting when you sob. You know, you can feel it, like it's like, oh, it expands and then it contracts. It expands and it contracts. And the sobbing actually serves to break up congestion in the chest and the ways we've hardened over our heart, the places that we have like a hard protective shield in our heart. The sobbing will break that up. So when that sobbing episode naturally comes to an end, I'll always feel like little pops of like pressure valves being released in my chest. Sometimes I'll burp a lot because that breaks up congestion. It just happens involuntarily. And what happens is after my chest does that popping, my whole chest feels more open, more expanded, and I can feel all the love in my heart. So that's the beauty of grief, is it can actually give us access to more love, not less. So this is beautiful for, say, if you go through a breakup, and if you really let yourself grieve that end of the relationship, you really let yourself sob, it will open up your heart to more love. So you can walk into your next relationship with a more open, loving heart instead of a shut down heart because you didn't let yourself grieve. So that's grief. The second one I wanted to talk about is anger, rage. Again, we're stuffing that down. It manifests in our system as chronic resentment. So how to access it, again, maybe something happens in your life. If not, like what I'll do is I'll feel into the resentment, again, follow it down until I hit the rage. The way I move the rage through my body is something that one of my teachers, his name's Faisal Mohammed, he developed the diamond approach with a couple other people. But he taught us this. He has, when my group gets together with him, if someone has a lot of rage, he'll have us do this in front of the whole group. And so what you do is you're going to set a couple pillows on your couch, some soft pillows, and then you kneel down on the floor in front of them. And you're going to put your hands together and put them out like this. Let me see. I may need to back up a little bit to show you this. Okay, so you raise them and then you hit the pillow. And as you hit the pillow, what you're going to do is make like a kind of a grunting noise, but from what Faisal says, from your guts. He'll be in there, do it from your guts. So you raise your hand and you go, huh, huh, and you really make that sound from your lower dantian, from your pelvis. And you just sit and you do it over and over again. And at some point you'll get tired out. So you pause for a second and you notice, did that move? If you feel like it didn't fully move yet, you go back and you do it again, and you just do it over and over and over and over again. And what will happen naturally is, when you've processed through that bit of anger, rage, is that you'll again feel like something pops open in your pelvis. And what opens up from rage is this really passionate, fiery, hot, like the color red, orgasmic energy. So again, if you go through a breakup and you have a lot of anger, if you really let the anger move, you can enter into your next relationship more sexually open instead of sexually shut down because you got hurt. So that's how I process through rage. It works really good and it's really fun. Like, processing through these emotions can be fun. So now I want to talk about fear. So the way I process through fear is actually, I have a book I'm going to recommend. It's called Trauma Release Process. The Revolutionary Trauma Release Process by David Berceli. So what happens when we have a lot of stuff down fear is that if we experience something where we felt a lot of fear, and I'm not talking about anxiety like I'm anxious because I have to give a speech or something like that. I'm talking about guttural fear. When we've experienced something where we have really guttural fear, it's usually that we experience something traumatic. That's when we really have that level of fear. And the body's natural response to trauma is to shake. If you watch animals, if they have something fearful happen, they shake afterwards. And little children do it too. Babies and children will shake if something happened that was really scary for them. But as grown-ups, what we'll normally do is if we experience something traumatic or fearful and our body starts involuntarily shaking, we'll stop it. We'll just contract and try and hold it in because it's weird, it's embarrassing, it feels out of control, all those reasons. And so when we do that, then the trauma and the fear get stuck in the body. And so in this book, what this person gives you are exercises that you can do where you're going to hold your body in a certain position for about 2 minutes. There's a bunch of different positions you can hold. And after about 2 minutes of holding these positions, what happens is your body starts to involuntarily shake. And when you go through that involuntary shaking, it begins to release stuck trauma and stuck fear from your body. And it's perfectly safe. If the shaking starts to feel like too much for you, all you have to do is move your body out of the position and you'll immediately start shaking. So you can let your body shake for as long as you want. There might be tears. You might feel like you want to scream, and you should. You should scream if you feel like you need to. But it really works well to relieve the body of trauma and fear. So those are the 3 emotions I wanted to talk about. There was one other thing I wanted to say, and that's that these emotions are intense. Again, this is why we stuff them down, because they're intense emotions. It can sometimes feel overwhelming to feel them in the midst of them. It's actually not. It's actually totally safe to feel them. It's safer to feel them than to not feel them, but it can feel scary. And so what I'll often do is, if I hit a place of really deep grief and it just starts to feel like too much for me, I'll text a friend like, hey, could you just be on the other end with me? So that might be a helpful thing, is to have someone there for you if you're going to dive into these really deep emotions. Just holding space, it can help you feel safe to go deeper. So that's just a tip that may help you. Yeah, I think that's it. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comments below, and I'll come back and answer. Or if you just want to share anything you got out of this video or what you thought about the video in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Other than that, I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.